Hi everyone, and welcome to the modules on teacher dismissal. I am recording these from the very tip of Africa, down here by Cape Town. I'm in a town called Stellenbosch right now, and you can hear water running in the background. I know that, I'm aware. You can see there's an awesome little stream that I'm standing behind. This is a great little town in South African wine country called Stellenbosch. You can see behind me the spectacular mountains. On those mountains are vineyards in every single direction that you look. It's spectacular. So I thought we would try to capture that spectacularness as we learn a little bit about teacher dismissal. And here on the homepage of teacher dismissal, you know I had to. The Donald, you're fired. That's what we're going to be talking about in this particular module, okay? So first off, before we can fire anybody, any teachers in public schools, first we have to talk about evaluation. Evaluation is a critical first step, and without documented evaluation procedures, we really cannot proceed to termination on competency grounds. So evaluations, when it comes to leading schools and working through employment issues, are absolutely critical to get right. And we have quite a bit of guidance, both in the law and in district policies, about how to evaluate teachers, okay? But all of that guidance from teacher evaluation, from law and policy, it really does tie your hands as school leaders. You can only evaluate on pre-assessed criteria. You can only evaluate at predetermined times. The evaluations must only focus on specific things that are happening in the classroom and cannot look at other things that are happening in the classroom. It's an extremely detailed procedure that for this law course we're not going to dive into. If you're a principalship student, you'll look at this in much more detail when you take the personnel course. But nevertheless, knowing that evaluation is central to teacher dismissal is absolutely critical because there are remediation steps that must happen during the evaluation procedure, multiple chances, all of which needs to happen before you can move a teacher into the dismissal procedures. Now let's start to talk about those procedures a little bit, okay? Now think back earlier in the class when we've talked about due process. If you remember all the way back to day one of this class, we probably talked about constitutional amendments, and I told you that the 14th Amendment, the due process clause of the 14th Amendment, actually perhaps has the most impact on schooling, and here is another one of those examples. Remember, no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. And when you want to terminate a teacher that's employed at a public school, that is a removal, a deprivation of a property interest, and so we must guarantee due process. However, that only applies when there is an actual dismissal, and that dismissal takes the form of a termination. We'll talk about that. Or that dismissal takes the form of a reduction in force. In a non-renewal, there is no deprivation because there is no contract interest. For a non-renewal, the contract has run its term and ended, so there is no expectation on behalf of the two parties to the contract that a teacher needs to be given anything. So that's no due process is needed. And if you've been in schools, you've probably seen we do need to give notice when it comes to non-renewals, but that's it. Teachers are not entitled to any additional protections. So let's just talk about that one first real fast before we move forward. So non-renewal is not fun. It's not an easy process for a teacher to have to go through. It certainly probably has happened to quite a few teachers that you know, and maybe even to you earlier in your career. There is no constitutional right in a non-renewal. There's no protections for due process or anything else. All you have to make sure that you're following are the evaluation and notice procedures for the non-renewal. So you must give notice of non-renewal 45 days before the school year ends. If you're in a district like Fayette County, in a large district, you're, as a principal, going to be given notifications. Who are you going to non-renew? You're going to be getting emails from the district like, make your choices. Who are you non-renewing? Leading up to that big decision in April 1st. If the notice is not provided by that deadline, then the teacher's contract automatically renews and they're entitled to a contract for the following year. Now let's talk about reasons for non-renewal. The advice that I give to principals is don't even get into in great detail what a teacher did wrong that led to the non-renewal. Kentucky law or district policy usually does state that you must give at least a cursory reason. I would just say something very broad, like did not fit in this environment or something like that. If you go into detail, what you're doing is you're giving the teacher that was non-renewed reasons to come back at you in a potential lawsuit. So if you say that the teacher really performed poorly, could not maintain classroom discipline, and the list goes on, then the teacher can come back and say, hey, no, wait a second, look at my student performance scores, or look at the very low number of disciplinary referrals. Now they have evidence, they have a case against you. So when you're doing these non-renewals, just be super broad, but also be super harsh. If a teacher is not really fitting, don't let your emotions get in the way here. Go ahead and proceed with the non-renewal. It is so much simpler to make a non-renewal choice early than to have to go through a dismissal procedure later. And so at STEAM and other schools that I've worked with, I've always encouraged if something's not feeling right early in the process, you should probably just non-renew. Harsh, but it is the environment that you're in as administrators. Okay, now let's talk about termination for cause. We have a list of causes in Kentucky statute. You can see it cited there, 161.790. That is the teacher termination law. It's very long and detailed and goes into great detail about the process, which we're going to look at in a second. But you can only terminate for one of these 6 reasons. Okay, that is it. No other reasons for termination are permissible outside of reduction in force, which we'll talk about in a second. But a teacher is fired because of incompetency, immorality, insubordination, neglect of duty, unprofessional conduct, or other good and just cause. Or physical and mental disability in Kentucky. Sorry, look at those in the orange box. Those are ours in Kentucky. It has to be for one of those. Now, it can be for multiple causes. It could be both insubordination and incompetency. Okay, that's great. Document each of those. Okay, each cause for termination does have to be documented. So you can't just at the end of the year to say, hey, I don't want this teacher back and I'm going to terminate this teacher for neglect of duty, but then not have all of the instances where her duties or his duties were neglected well documented in advance. Okay, document one of these causes for termination. That is how you start to build a case for teacher termination. Now, let's say you have documented. You're ready to terminate a teacher, right? The district is involved. You've done your homework. Now there's a long process that must play out, okay? You have to provide notice. You've got to provide a hearing, access to the evidence. They might seek legal counsel. They might even cross-examine. There has to be transcripts of all of this presented. Then there's an appeal to the Kentucky Department of Education provided to the teacher. This could go on for a while and likely will go on for a while, but that is the process. In Kentucky, teachers have built protections for themselves into state law rather than trying to unionize district by district by district by district. If you're in Jefferson County, there are additional due process requirements in the collective bargaining agreement, in addition to state law. There's a long list. If you're thinking about terminating a teacher, you need to go do your homework, speak to your legal counsel. The legal counsel needs to prepare all of the procedural requirements for engaging in termination. It's hard, it's a pain, but it's the right thing for kids if you have an ineffective teacher or you have a teacher that is harmful to children. Any of those reasons on the last slide. Those are all great reasons to terminate. Okay, now last one for this is around tenure and riffing. So a riff is a reduction in force. Basically, it's laying off a teacher for economic reasons. However, there has to be legitimate economic reasons, and the choice of which teachers are laid off is all provided for in state law. All right? So we've had to use this over the last decade because of the economic downturn. We've had to engage in reductions in force. Right now, the schools in the mountains are having to, not as big as those mountains, those are awesome, but schools in our Appalachian Mountains are engaging in reductions in force because of the depopulation. It might happen, it likely will happen at some point in your principalship career. That is fine. First, you have to let go of all non-tenured teachers. You could have a great non-tenured teacher that's teaching English, but that English non-tenured teacher must go in a reduction in force before the teacher that's been teaching for 30 years, okay? Now, the teacher that's been teaching for 30 years is going to save you a lot more money if you reduce that position, but that's why some of these protections have been built into law, okay? You can also go for a RIF for an entire area. So you can say, hey, even though our music teacher has been here, and I know some of you music teachers, this one is sensitive, so I'm just playing with you with this example. Even though our music teacher has been here for 20 years, the entire music program needs to be cut. And so even though this teacher has a lot of seniority, they're the one that has to go. You can make those decisions as a school, but that is the procedures you need to go through in a reduction in force. Okay, thanks for playing along. Enjoy the scenery. Oh, it's spectacular. I just want to go put my toes down there in that creek. Thanks for watching.